All right, then let's get going. Welcome to today's webinar. Today we are taking a closer look at assessing your M365 tenant for a business carve-out or tenant-to-tenant migration. I have a special guest with me today, Ed Houweling from the Royal BAM Group. And I will be your host today. My name is Björn Erkens. I'm the product owner of Rencore Governance. Maybe Ed, some words about yourself before we get going.
Yeah, I'm Ed Houweling, responsible for the Office 365 Competence Center within BAM. I joined BAM at November 2017, and before BAM, I spent 9 years at Microsoft as an account technology strategist. So I even worked with the predecessor of Office 365, which was then called BPOS, Business Productivity Online Suite. So I do have some experience in this area.
Perfect. And thanks so much for joining us today. So something about Royal BAM. Ed, what are you guys doing over there?
We're doing all kinds of construction works, from building stadiums, roads, tunnels, you name it. Currently, BAM is doing that in several countries, UK, Ireland, Netherlands, but also still in Germany and Belgium. Although approximately a year ago, our executive committee decided we should change our strategy and we will focus more on UK and Ireland and the Netherlands. Which means we do some divestments or sell our activities in the other two countries, Belgium and Germany. And that's also, I think, the link to today's topic, because we had to do some carve-outs, and we're still working on carve-outs, and we have some experience there, which we are like to share.
Perfect. And maybe something for you, our audience. So Ed and Royal BAM are one of our first actual Rencore Governance customers. And so obviously Ed got the tool for Royal BAM for more of the governance purposes we do for M365 governance and so on. But then at one point, I think, Ed, we had this conversation where you told me, yeah, we actually use your tool to doing these tenant-to-tenant migrations. And I was intrigued because we never thought about that before. And then all of a sudden, people began asking us also, hey, can we use your tool for this tenant-to-tenant migration? So that's actually how this webinar today came about. Yeah, tell us a little bit about your carve-out projects at BAM.
Yeah, as I told you earlier, we're moving away from Germany and Belgium. We have some activities there, and what we did, we had BAM Deutschland, which was sold to the Czech group, which already has been carved out, and we're now in the stage of hypercare. Also with BAM Galère in Belgium, and we have two upcoming. That's BAM Contractors in Belgium, which will take place at the end of November this year, also due to the holidays, etc. And recently there was a press announcement that we've also sold our activities from Björn Freitag to the Czech group. So we need to plan these activities. Based on those four ones, we also see two types of carve-outs. One was that the new owner pulls in the data. That was the first one with BAM Deutschland, where Czech already had an Office 365 environment, and they said, okay, we will pull the data into our own environment. And the BAM Galère one was just pushing it out from a BAM perspective to a new tenant. So we have also some experience in both situations, and I expect the BAM Contractors one will also be one where we push out the data. And the Björn Freitag one will be, again, one where the new owner, Czech, in this case, will pull in the data from our tenants. And you have different aspects. The majority of the work is the same. The work needs to be done. But for instance, if you want to have a new owner pull in the data into their tenant, that means that you need to give an external party access to data in your tenant, and that has some legal consequences also. I won't touch on the legal consequences in this talk. That's a separate stream, because it's also about which data are you going to move over and hand over, which is necessary. Do we have any obligations to keep data available? Because BAM was, for instance, if a project is running, we were responsible for the first 2 years of that project, and we need to keep the data, etc. all kinds of interesting discussions, but I won't touch on them in this talk. But be aware that also takes it needs to be done and takes some time.
Perfect. All right, then yeah, let's talk a little bit about best practice, because I guess the people listening to our webinar today, they are probably all in that situation that they are having a carve-out coming along, or they want to inform themselves. So you, as you have done quite some already, how do your BAM best practice look like? What is the process behind all of these carve-outs or these tenant-to-tenant migrations?
Yeah, for us, the user is key. We have when we started with the first carve-out, we had a tenant with approximately 20,000 users. So if you want to give some external party access to your tenant, you really need to be able to limit what data needs to go out and which users are affected, etc. So what we have, we call them day one activities, but we start earlier. But day one activities are for us the moment when the contract is officially signed with all the approvals of the government, etc. Then what we do, we changed some pieces of our intranet so that our former colleagues, which stepped over to another company, feel at home with the branding of the new company where they belong to. But also we make some changes to their UPN, their email address, and their SIP addresses, because that will be also one of the main features where we can identify these are the users affected. These users will go out, but these users are also owners of teams, owners of groups, members of teams, members of SharePoint sites, etc. So you need to be able to identify your users, and that's what we do with what we call the day one activity, changing a user's UPN and SIP address. You can also decide, for instance, to change the company name in the AD as an alternative, so they keep on using their old email address, but change the name of the company. But there must be a way how you can identify these users belong to the carve-out, and everything they own or they're participant in needs to be also carved out or hand over to the new owner. So that's the first thing we always start with. That's one step in the whole process. We made some a short overview of the process. Maybe if you can switch to the next slide, and I will give you some more details on this. Where we started, where we knew we had to do some carve-outs, this is also where we started to make an inventory on how is the BAM tenant configured. What choices did we make? How did we configure it, etc. That's something, and luckily the carve-outs are in a real rapid follow-up. So we had to do it only once. But if there are a few years in between, you can make some changes to your tenant, so you have to redo it. But that's where we started with. How is our tenant configured? And that's also the question we said to the new owner. How, if it is an existing owner, you Office 365 user, how is your tenant configured? Because at a later stage, you need to do some communication if there are differences. And yeah, you have to decide, will we take over this or will we leave it that way? So if we have then, and that's something we did once, setting up the configuration of our tenant, and also the other party needs to set up and bring in what is their setup, then we can have staff to take a look at the changes. One of the changes, for instance, which we ran into is that on our side, the OneDrive size is limited to 1 terabyte. But we had one situation where the new owner said, no, we have limited to 500 gigabytes. So at that point in time, you say, okay, there might be some users who are affected, who have the amount of data on their OneDrive between 500 gigabytes and 1 terabyte. You cannot say, oh, you will just lose data or something like that. So you have to at least inform them and see what are you going to do with that. And that's also then also where Rencore governance already comes in, because we started quite early with building some, we abused the checks feature within Rencore governance. So we say, okay, which user with, for instance, an email address with @sec in their email address or in the UPN has a OneDrive with a size larger than 500 gigabytes. So then you know, okay, these users will be affected by the change, and then it's okay. How are you going to inform those users? For instance, if you say the limit will be on 500 gigabytes, so that's where already a Rencore governance comes in place, and so. Yeah, you can have some more changes and things you want or you don't want, and already at that point in time, let me call it the data warehouse underneath Rencore governance is already giving us insights in what will it be and where do we have to change this, who is affected, etc. We can also take a look at things in the next step. How are we going to migrate? Do we pull in on the other side? Do we pull out? That's not where Rencore plays a major role, but based on the strategy you decide for and the data which is in Rencore, we know, we have so many OneDrives to migrate with so many data, which will take approximately so many time, and we have to spin up several migration servers, etc. So that's already where the data helps us in preparing what we need to do and do some planning. So that's already also where you might not expect to have Rencore governance. You need Rencore governance, but that's already where it can help you in building the whole plan.
I just wanted to maybe underline this. So I mean, our tool is all about visibility, right? And with the different checks and things that you can build, you get visibility into that data, and you can really easily build out views on data. So you get all of that information, so you can make an informed decision. But I didn't want to disturb you from speaking. So we are showing some examples after that slide. So then this becomes more tangible. But please, continue.
Yeah, and it also keeps you updated during the process, because this process starts and you have some negotiations, how we're going to do it, etc. And then you make a picture of the situation at that point in time. But users keep on asking for SharePoint sites, team environments, putting data on their OneDrive, etc. So you can also keep track. Okay, how is it progressing? So at the moment that you're really going to do the migration, you have the actual live data. Because Rencore keeps on scanning and updating the whole environment. But before we start migrating, we also we found out what's user impact, and we also need to do some on user adoption and communication. For instance, if you own a SharePoint site which has an external user, and the SharePoint site will move to another tenant, you need to re-invite the external user in the new tenant. And that's what we call user adoption and communication. But based on the data we have, and that's why I said the user is key in the earlier stage, we know which user do we need to inform to do what after the migration. So that will help them instead of, now this is your new tenant. Hey, I'm missing all kinds of members in my site, etc. No, you can target your message to, okay, you need to do this, and you need to do this, and you need to do this. Of course, we try to limit it as much as possible, because the user is never happy when he has to do some things and he thinks, but why should I do it? Can't you do it automatically? But there are things you have to do, and you have to inform them. And the communication is mainly set up by the new owner, because in fact it is their tenant, it's their employees, and we're only supporting them and giving them the insights. Well, hey, this is what we need to do. And they can also decide not to communicate, but that's their responsibility then. Then we have the migration process. That's just physical migration, pulling over data, etc. Not very sexy, but really important. And that's where Rencore doesn't give us any support, because we have tools like SharePoint or ShareGate or BitTitan, etc. to do the work for us. And even in the phase afterwards, if we say, okay, we now performed the carve-out, there's still a hypercare period. So we say, okay, if something is missing or hasn't gone well, although we do all kinds of checks during the migration process, the data is still with us. But after a certain amount of time, we decide to delete the data, because it's not our data anymore. It has been sold to another company, so we have to remove it. And even at that point in time, we still keep the checks and the dashboards available within Rencore, because we can see, okay, we're deleting the stuff, and in the end, everything has to be on 0. So we know, okay, everything is deleted, and then we can remove the dashboards and the checks. So I think some people might might be a little bit surprised that we use Rencore in all these stages, because Rencore is based on what I call a data warehouse with all the stuff in it from our tenant. And use the data. It's already there while building your own scripts, and while you can easily build the checks and provide insights. And also, we're very happy with the export function, because we can hand over some sheets with data to the new owner. Say, okay, this is what you will get. Are you aware? And it also enables better conversations. So we'll use them in a quite a few steps in our migration approach. We did it twice. This whole we're for 2 migrations. We're in the cleanup phase, almost in cleanup phase. One was the pull in, and one was the push out, and it works in both scenarios. We now have a team. To be honest, we now have a team who has done the first 2. And we keep on also asking them, okay, help us with the other ones, because we have an experienced team, and they follow up each other in a close pace. So. It works good for us.
Sounds good. Then let's have a look at some examples, so that becomes a little bit more tangible maybe then. So these are some checks you kind of created for this whole migration purpose. Maybe you can talk us a little bit through these different things. I don't know. These are some screenshots, but maybe shall we take this list first and then go to the screenshots? How do you want to do this?
Let's take the list first. Because if a user migrates from one tenant to the other tenant, in the old tenant, or the tenant where he's currently residing, he has some licenses. And when you migrate him over to the new environment, he still needs to get the same licenses. Because why should you give somebody an Office 365 E1 license if he now has an E3 license, for instance? So it's quite easy to build a check and say, okay, which users with this specs have which licenses, and you get a list of licenses which you can easily hand over to the new owners. Okay, if he's migrated, these are the licenses that person needs. In our tenant, we have approximately 25,000 SharePoint sites, so that's quite a lot. And some of these sites are owned by the company who are carved out, and especially the owner is a user from that company. So that's relatively easy to say, okay, these sites have to be handed over. And once again, I won't touch on the legal discussions, which data, etc. But we need to identify which sites are we talking about. But you also have that sometimes people are participant in another project, so they are a member of SharePoint sites. And you don't want to stop that project. If the project continues after the handover, that person still needs to be the member of the new site. And also that user is moving to another tenant. So he also needs to be invited by the current owner to pull them in and say, okay, keep on working on the collaboration. That's the one for SharePoint sites. The same is for Teams, which teams are owned by current owner, by the current people who will be migrated. Also, the memberships are there. External members, which is also important. Almost every construction project is a combination of more than a few companies. So you quite often have external members. We also have groups owned by the people who will step over, and the members, same there. The OneDrive data, I already touched on that, because people store a lot of data also on their OneDrive. Although we say OneDrive is for your personal data, there are still people who are close to the 1 gigabyte. But you have to have to migrate it over. Another thing is the flows, the automations, but flows are owned by people who will be migrated, and the Canvas apps, the Power Apps which are there, and also which Azure AD roles do they currently have, and will they get them also in the new environment? That's up to the new owner to decide, but at least to do their work, this is the roles they currently have. And if you're a good listener and reader, you see, hey, there's no exchange on it. Well, exchange is also part of Rencore governance. But Microsoft has a feature which scrambles the names of the mailboxes, etc. You can turn it off if you want, but we decided within BAM not to turn it off, which means that Rencore, when they scan the environment, only get the scrambled mailbox names. So in this case, based on our decision to scramble the mailbox names, Rencore governance is not very useful for us. So we built some scripting ourselves at the back end to do that migration. But yeah, these are the majority of the stuff I think which is Rencore governance right now, which we use because it gives us insight. We also had some CRM projects, and they were handled separately because there's for a limited number of users who were using Dynamic CRM, and the new owner had another CRM system, so there had to be a different transfer. So this is what we created to at least support and do the planning for the migrations.
Perfect. Yeah, then let's have a look at some screenshots that you actually took. So we can see how these things then look like, right? So you used, as you mentioned already, you used our check logic, our check builder, which gives you the possibility with this graphical interface to just create these data queries, right? So talk us through these, please.
Yeah, it works relatively simple, and we built one for the first carve-out, which was BAM Deutschland to check, and when the second carve-out was announced, we just cloned the checks, changed the parameters, and now I've not done it now for 3 times, and the 4th one will be coming. So what we did here, we said, okay, for every user who has a UPN which contains @sec, that was the new mail domain. Show us all the licenses. That was everything we had to do, and if we then click next, then you can give it a name, and then in the end we'll show a picture later of it, how it will look like, and it shows you, oh, this is the number of users which are let me call it violations of this check. So you get the insights, but we'll show a picture of that later. It's relatively simple. It's 3 screens. And this is another one we built. Here, did we take a look at SharePoint sites which are owned by Stadbare Contractors, which is the new owner of the BAM Contractors company within Belgium. Same question, give us all the SharePoint site collections with SharePoint owners who have, and there were several domains which they used, who have a UPN which contains one of these domains. And that was all we had to configure, and it gave us the numbers and said, okay, you have X amount of users, and then the list. If we go to the next image, this is the after you save the check, this is what will happen. It will start scanning. So you see now we had 143 SharePoint sites owned by Stadsbader Contractors employees. You see a trend line, which is also nice. And at the bottom, and I removed all the names of the sites because I don't think that was adding value for you. But you see here the name of the site, the display name of the site. You can see some notes we made, which you can add. But you, for instance, also see how much storage is used, etc. If there's a sensitivity label on that side, yes or no. And you also see on the right-hand side the second last column, export, which was a highly used button because some people really like to do everything in Excel. So you say export, and then an Excel file will be generated with all the data. You can choose all the data which is on screen, but you can also choose for all columns, and you get an immense amount of columns which are in the Rencore database regarding a SharePoint site, and then you can do some playing around with it. So relatively simple, and this gives you a visible insight, and it's helping us enormously. Our project lead also built some dashboards around it. This is, for instance, again the BAM Day A to check carve out. Based on all those checks, he created a dashboard with all kinds of graphics. And these are just 2 of his own whole dashboards. So he had one web page where you could see how things are development, how many numbers, and what the numbers are, etc. This is something he did himself. Building the checks is something we do within my team. But he could build easily an overview which suits him best. So he could stay in control of what was happening and if we were doing the right things.
Yeah, And what I really like is kind of this orange line, which indicates, okay, you have actually done your job now, right? It goes down to 0. So everything is done. That's good.
And then, if everything is done, then we can remove it, and that's also easy to remove it. So that's a little bit of the the data collection and the checks. In this case, we didn't use any automations to do the work first. You could even think about creating automation which moves blah blah blah, but no, we decided not to do it. Just use ShareGate, which was the easiest way.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, very nice. So I would think we have time for questions, right? So I think that's why you guys are here, to kind of have a first-hand experience of some other people who actually did this tenant-to-tenant migration, carve-out, use Rencore governance for that. So I imagine that there are some questions. So feel free to put your questions into the FAQ function. Chrissy, that's how we're doing it today, right? People can chat you the questions and then you read them out aloud, right?
Yes, exactly.
Perfect. So then let us know if we have questions. What are you guys interested in? Maybe you can also obviously describe us the scenario you are in, ask for advice, or how are you taking things? What is your best practice? How do you want to go about? Maybe some questions for Ed here that he can still clarify what he did, what process he took, and so on. So let's give it maybe a minute or two for people to put in some questions, and then we can take them.
Yeah, the uses of Rencore during the carve-outs already helped us. Let me call it even stronger the business case for us, because we like to build scripts and do it, everything, etc. But now we didn't even think about building scripts. Just building the checks, and when there's a new carve-out, okay, these are the checks which are really useful. Also in this case, no, we clone them, and within half an hour, we have the new data available. And sometimes the scanning and the presenting the data for the first round takes more time than building the checks. Our tenant is quite big, quite extensive, so it sometimes takes. If you have 25,000 SharePoint sites, you need to filter all the owners with a specific filter. That might take some time, but it's also minutes, not hours or something like that. But updating the checks easily.
Nice. So maybe I have a question. I had a recent conversation with another company that were also looking at us to do their tenant-to-tenant migration. They were asking me the question, okay, they are also in contact with Microsoft, for example, and Microsoft wanted to provide them, of course, for money also, with a dump on their whole tenant. And so they were asking me, okay, why should we do such a tool instead of getting a Microsoft dump? And maybe that's something that I would like to ask you as well, Ed. I mean, I have my answer, but maybe you can tell me a little bit about your thoughts. Was that something that crossed your mind as well when you said, okay, we need to do this migration? Maybe we ask Microsoft for data, or what were your thoughts around that?
We had a very short conversation about it. But what you get then is an immense Excel file with containing all the data, and then you have to dig in and split the data and do all kinds of activities. While we now had the checks, which were quite focused. So okay, SharePoint owned by, the SharePoint sites member of, the external members, etc. And it was also easily to export. So no, we didn't even. We had a very short conversation about, shall we ask Microsoft? Also because we already had the Rencore environment up and running already for ourselves. So and Microsoft, once again, they don't do it for free. So why should we spend money while we have the tool available, and also giving us the the graphs you see on this slide, also the insights on what's happening and are we doing the right things. Which, when you get a big immense Excel file from Microsoft, you start building your own graphs, etc. Takes additional time, and this is much easier.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I think that was our conclusion there with this other company as well. That, I mean, the data queries, that's what it's all about, right? You have your ideas, what you want to find out, and then you want to have this graphical interface where you can just put in this data query, and then you get the results, and in a graphical way that you can get an easier overview. Chris,
and maybe one additional comment. When you get the dump from Microsoft, it is, for instance, at April 1st. But April 1st, you start with the first conversations and the planning, etc. And over time, users keep on storing data on the OneDrive, requesting SharePoint sites, storing data there. And Rencore scans on a daily basis everything. So you keep the updates going.
Yeah, makes sense, because that gives you the possibility to see how things are progressing, right? And like this slide that we are looking at, for example, is everything under control? Has everything been taken care of? Is everything at 0 now, right? Otherwise you would have to get like various data dumps from Microsoft. Yeah, that makes sense. Chrissy, do we have any questions?
Not as of now, no.
All right, then.
No open questions.
Obviously all people are happy. Ed, that means you did a fantastic job. Then thank you for the time today, Ed, and thank you everyone for joining us. And then I probably see you next time, probably next month when we have another webinar. So thanks a lot for the time. Have a nice summer vacation and see you around pretty soon. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.